27th of September 2000 and well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Sunday Sessions. This is our weekly time for exploring nature-based or nature-centered folklore, connecting this mindfully within your favorite tree or garden sanctuary, and then expressing your inspired visions through your writing, poetry, art, craft, performance, problem solving, however you express yourself. Now, today's Sunday session is one of the 4 Ogham sessions that I host. And this is going to be the Ogham Stones story. And there's a bunch together there. And today's guests and features, we've got Linda Rosewood, who's you can say hello to here. There we go. There's Linda. Hello. We'll be having Linda a bit later. And Denise Terry, who unfortunately she can't be live. She's got family have arrived. So, and we didn't do a pre-recorded. So I'll be reading her feature, and they've come here for to continue about apples, because there are apple festivals that are on. The Clonmel one, I think it's their last day, been very active. Unfortunately, the Organic Centre one, because of the COVID, was cancelled. I think Dromahair had theirs yesterday, and there may well be apple festivals and celebrations near you. Anyway, this is not, we did apples last week, and it's nice to do a little addendum this week as well. But before Linda comes up and before I share Denise, this is really about Ogham Stones stories. And I'm going to be covering the medieval carved stones there. And the pre-medieval carved stones, these sort of wonderful, very old ones, and their folklore, also their modern kind of pagan myths. And then we're going to go on to the post-medieval, and you can see there they look a bit different. For a start, they've been carved on the outside. And with the post-medieval Ogham stones, we're discussing why were they made? They were actually cut until the 1930s. So what was their purpose? What was the change? Anyway, let's see. I see some of you have come on board, and who we got? Hi, Donna. Brilliant. Thank you for joining in. A loyal supporter from New Mexico. Lovely. Thank you. And that's it. You're on. All right. Great. Thanks very much. Okay, let's get going with the medieval carved Ogham stones, and I'm just lining up a bunch of pictures for you for that. Thing with those, with the Ogham, 2 subjects in the Ogham realm always seem to pop up when I start talking about Ogham on any Sunday session. You may remember way back in March, I tried to do them all in one session, and I really had to cut it up. And I thought, okay, we can have a nice, quiet, short one just with the Ogham Stone story. But I have a feeling there's going to be quite a bit of content with this. So I trust you will enjoy it, as you usually do on Sunday sessions. Now, one is the tree wisdom in tree, the language of the trees, how that entered into the Ogham alphabet and its language. And the other thing that's always considered, people talk to me about the Ogham stones being a place of sacredness. And they talk about the sacred Irish trees. And I will be touching on some of the issues with this, with the Ogham, obviously, we're talking about, but the folklore, the tree folklore behind that, and also the connection to the tree law, the tree-based law, the Brehon Law. So I'll be covering that a fair bit. One thing that's interesting is, the actual name Ogham. Where does that actually come from? What does that actually mean itself? It may be something you consider when you use Ogham in your own way as part of your personal divination. And anyway, divination and tree wisdom are going to be separate Sunday sessions that's down the road. But I'm going to introduce a little bit of that shortly, and because it does help to connect the dots. But I'm going to try and stick to the stones as much as possible. You know how I go on. Anyway, let's go on to the word Ogham. Oh, Ewan, and I've got an actual spelling here. There you go. I think this is it. There you go. Ogham. Oh, Ewan. That's how it's. Well, this is how the scribes first said it when people pronounced it. And what that means, you get the O, the OG. That means really is a description of cutting a seam, cutting a line with a sharp weapon. They always call them weapons, even though it should have been farming tools. But there was a transition to weapons at this point. By the time we got to medieval, what were farm tools were weapons. It was when the Iron Age had got into full thrust and the production of iron tools was quite abundant. And then you've got the which now the actual itself, I totally forgot what that part of it is rolling the memory round, moulding the memory round. The actual O is really the sort of burning of the cut, and the actual cut itself, that's the Ogham bit. That's the general thing. And it's said that the Ogham was started up by Omer, and you may be familiar with my Omer Tale of the Trees. And Omer himself, it said that he started off with a sign language, that he used the 10 fingers and he did crisscrosses, and then somehow perhaps he cut sticks, cut wood. It's not known. It's very much a folklore that's in the hands of the storyteller. But even in his name, the Og or Ak actually means to cut. And a couple of storytellers I've heard, they've said that one of the Ogham statements, of course it wasn't recorded down unless it was actually recorded in the Ogham itself, that it was a form of duplicated language, because before families had their own grunts and groans, their own language, but they couldn't talk to their next door neighbors. So there were hundreds, if not thousands, of languages, all due to the various families. So Ogham took that challenge. How do you unify a language so people can speak to one another? But of course, not everybody wanted to learn it. And it's said that people that learned the Ogham, whether it was called Ogham then, was of learned people. And that set them apart from the rustics. And of course, we've had that ever since, that division of the so-called learned and wise ones and the people of the lower echelons. But that's the way we describe it again. So there we go. Omer himself, excuse me while I get a drink, going very dry again. Get this at the beginning of every Sunday session, didn't I? So it said the Omer was short for Olmec, son. Now, on the Ogham Stones, I might be able to get that to you, but when you've got inscriptions on the stones, you don't get Mac. You get Macca, M-A-C-C-A, so-and-so, son of so-and-so. For some reason, you don't get the women on the stones. I don't know why. But there again, we were into medieval, where the patriarchal forces were very much in abundance from that time. But storytellers to me have said that his full name was Omaxolus, which means that he was the cutter of the light. So take that as you mean. This is all really about imagination. But it's interesting that Macca, M-A-C-C-A, because just even thinking of Paul McCartney today, what's his nickname? Macca. And a lot of Macs that I know, Macca, and it goes back, I don't know if Paul McCartney's friends have seen Ogham Stones and saw Macca, but anyway, there you have that, the Mac, which is a very important inscription on Ogham Stones. Now, there's two questions I'm going to explore. Why carving on stones in the first place? And why medieval? Because the Ogham on stones really started to appear through medieval times. So I'm going to jump to the medieval first. And as you may be familiar, the early medieval was a time of the Dark Ages. There were wars around the world, and clans were expanding, and they were trying to find and expand their new boundaries and get the new acquisition of more forest, to get more wood, to make more charcoal, to make more iron foundries, and so forth. So there was a lot of bickering and battling going on. And when there's bickering and battling, the one thing that falls apart is education. And even scribing itself. There were symboled languages in the Middle East and China, Japan. In many countries, they did have an incredibly well-formatted language, but with the battling, this was all starting to fall apart. Even the Romans with the Latin, quite well formed, but once they had gone from Britain, suddenly Britain didn't really have a writing language. So there was, with battling, there's no time to teach it or pass it down because the priority itself was battle. So let's, I should have been showing you pictures of that. Again, sort of carried away. And I got some lovely pictures of old students here. There's a thinking of the Orm. There we go. We got the definitely cut lines in that one. That's actually at the Heritage Museum down near Wexford, that one. But it is a genuine Ogham stone that they got and put in place. They didn't make that one. And so we got the medieval education here, and perhaps this is the way it was in Ireland, and perhaps they were just sitting around like this in Britain as well. So Ireland became a savior for establishing and preserving the culture of the scholar. But when the Saxons started reducing their squabbles with each other, things started changing dramatically. The Saxon tribes who were battling with each other with their different beliefs, different ways of living, they started to unite with one another through Christianity. We would say today Christianity. It was because they were getting teachings about the Gospels and the Psalms, which was associated with music. And that was all thanks to the Welsh. The Welsh never let go of Christianity once the Romans left. They held on to it, and they held on to that language. And even though they had been pushed into the hills by the Romans, they came out of Wales and they went over the Anglo area, and then in come the Saxons, pushed them back up into the Welsh mountains again, but eventually integrated back with these Saxons through the teaching, and there was the uniting of the Christianity. Do I have something on that? Yeah, oh, that's a Pict stone. Right. Now, what became of Britain became another realm of scholars, and as I say, as the world kept fighting. Now, early medieval, we're talking about a time from St. Patrick in Ireland, and through the times of Breda and St. Bridget, Columbkille of the 6th century, and then on to the 9th century before the Norse people arrived in their droves and changed everything again. But during that 5th century and that 9th century, it really was a time of language revolution, which I tend to relate to very much like the digital and PC revolution that we're going through now, that we have done since the 1980s. You think people were starting to get their personal computers in their homes, their trash 80s, their Apple IIs, their I'm trying to think of the one that was great for the music. Begins with C. I used to have one myself, but I can't think of it now. I don't remember the brands. I was into it at the time. Toshiba certainly had them, but and Amstrad came along. Commodore, that's the one. People were into it. Just think how we've come from that and into the .com booms of the 90s and the social media from 2000 onwards. And then we're really racing into a revolution, which was very much how scribing had got to by the time it was 8th, 9th century. Of course, we're talking about from 1980, we're talking about 40 years for the digital. We're talking about 400 years, slower transformation. Anyway, what was revolutionary about this was the fact that it was language and symbols that were getting archived. It wasn't just the memory of what was being said to you. They were actually being archived. And this is where the Ogham Stones really came in. The archiving did start very much on the stones. Let's bring the stone up. And this is a pig stone. So it wasn't just the Ogham. This was another language of symbols that had come from the influence of the Welsh up into Scotland, especially in the northeast of Scotland, which I'll show you later. But the scribing started to get onto parchment, of course, and onto paper. So this was a huge revolution in itself. So this was a time when memorized oral language was finding its way onto symbols, which was quite something. And it was ordered into linear formats. If you look at this page, everything suddenly, where we have sound, which to me, when you're telling a story, you're telling stuff in a cycle, in a spiral, and there's no beginning or end. It tends to sort of keep evolving, like the weather, like the seasons, through the year, like the months, like the moon. And suddenly all that changed into this linear way. Of course, in China and Japan, they were going up the vertical. This suddenly going on the horizontal. And I think that in itself, that simple thing, is quite dramatic. But the Ogham was a bit different there. The monk scholars, they had their Greek and Latin-based scribed alphabets. But what about everybody else? The rustics, as I mentioned earlier, the rustics, or the peasants from the paganus, which is really the Latin name that we said, the pagan people, or as the Danes and the Vikings would say, heathen people. I actually adore that heathen name. I'd rather be known as a heathen rather than a pagan myself. Anyway, it seemed to be they only had this language of straight line carving skills, and they could do these wonderful straight lines. So how did they put order and sound into their straight line collections? I'm going to say a bit about that shortly. Anyway, who we got on board? I'll take a break from that for a moment to see I see there's a few people joining in there. Shell, how you doing? Great to see you here. And who we got here? Leslie. Yeah, thank you very much. Leslie joins in on the Ogham. He definitely has a fascination. He could probably give this talk now. So thanks very much here for being here, Leslie. And we, Donna, I've actually met one of the stones when I was there. Well, I've got a little wee secret. I've got you by a stone a bit later on. Very lovely photo, and I hope you don't mind, Donna, but it's going to be very relevant for what I have to say. And even Claire's joined in here because she's had her internet down. So hello, Claire. Everybody say hello to Claire. I'm delighted that she's online herself as well. So let me continue on with this because, as I say, what I've done, I'm feeding so much stuff. I've got loads and loads of pictures on this, and I haven't got the videos this week because other sessions, there's a lot more interaction and there's a lot of videos from people. But this time, this is sort of very much, I suppose, in lecture mode. But thank you for making your little contributions. Ask away with your questions, and we'll get through this somehow, some way, and I trust you'll continue to find it interesting. Now, what always baffles me is how oral sounds are made into symbols. I'm always bringing this up because it's just a non-ending fascination for me. And I often discuss how a short story can get wrapped up in a single Gaelic, Irish word. And recently I was in quite a discussion with a few people about a word that I understood, and I wasn't sure about how it's spelled, and it was because I've seen the spelling, kabla. And I knew kabla, and it is a very expressive thing. Kabla was, when we lived in the Hebrides Isle of Mull, kabla was said And this time of year, the storms are coming in off of the Atlantic usually about now, or will do in the next couple of weeks. So when they swell, especially the swell, and the sea's whipped up, and the waves are huge, and the wind is there, and the air is usually quite mild and quite warm at that time. So it's really telling the story about that condition. It's about the condition, and it's all done with this one word, kabla. And that actually has a story, that word, kabla. What it's talking about, you might be familiar with, in Ireland, the dagda is sometimes known as the doida. And in Ireland, we have the kayak, we have the hag. Now, for some reason, the doida in Scotland, in the west of Scotland, changes gender. She is a hag, a woman that's inside the mountain. And they do have the word kayak in places because we've got the kayak Wrekin, who with the whirlpool, you might be familiar with, north of Durham. But in the Berg, for instance, which is a wonderful peninsula of layers, a fascinating place to go with loads of waterfalls, we have the kayak that lives in there. So they say, when you say kabla, it's saying to people that the doida, the kayak, the hag, has come out into the sea, and she's really warm. She has the hot womb, and as she gets into the sea to bathe herself, the hot womb warms the sea, and because it warms the sea then gets rough, and as it gets rough, all of the dormant souls that are in the sea on the way to Tir na Nog are now dancing, and it's their dancing that causes the waves, it causes the wind, and that's all expressed. That entire story is expressed in one word, kabla. Let's see if I can get it up for you. There's two spellings. The one on the right is the one that I was familiar with. It was actually a traveler that spelled that out for me. And the one on the left is the one that we're in debate. So they're kabla. So what's that got to do with Ogham? I just thought it'd be interesting, but to me, it's lovely. How do you translate that story? How did that story and that condition get translated into that one word, linear word, kabla? And that's the actual point that really fascinates me a lot. And it's continued. There'll never be an answer to this, but it's just, I find very fascinating. So, when we do linear language, there's one thing that's obvious, is that when we really focus on things, don't we? When we write sentences, it's about things and what we're doing with things. In oral language, there wasn't, at the time of the oral language, there wasn't so much a sense of ownership. I don't think the concept of ownership was really in the minds of many people at that time. Certainly business and trading was being done by some people, and they would start to be thinking about the concept of ownership because they were seeing acquisition actually happening in their lives. But for regular people, they're responding to the seasons and surviving. So it's not about ownership. It's about the conditions of what's going on around them. That's what they want to talk about. That's what they want to relate to. So how do you put that into a linear language of things? Deep mystery. Anyway, as going back to the stones, one thing about stones, I haven't got any actual physical examples, not very good ones anyway. But it starts, look, on this case, look at the right here. It's on the edge of the stone, and you start from the bottom, you work upwards. And if you haven't really said all you wanted to say, you go across the top and you come down the other side. I think I might have one stone that does a bit of that. Is that one here? Oh, you can't see it. No, I'm going to have to talk a bit more about that one. Anyway, that's how it's done. But what is being said on these stones? Before I talk about the stones and where they come from, I'm going to stay on exploring what was actually written to them. And academic people, they seem to believe that there's two types of Ogham stones. Of course, academics, they have to kind of have cut stuff in the middle. They've got to have the boxes and the pigeonholes. So they have one pigeonhole for the orthodox Ogham stones, and then you got the other pigeonhole for the scholastic, as they call it. Now, the orthodox, that's the one that I'm been talking about. It serves the most mystery, and it's a way of trying to create order out of unknown origins. That's the way I see it. And the stones that seem to host the old spellings they seem to host names. Those earliest ones, early medieval, even pre-medieval, they seem to host names, but the spellings confuse people, especially ancient linguists, because they don't exactly follow Latinized translations that the scribes are trying to do, and even the sculptors who have been learning Latin and Greek and trying to apply to stones, even they can't quite do it. And to us looking at these stones and what's written, it all seems to be very gobbledygook. Now, there is speculation, and I think this is an obvious one. I talked about archiving. Oral language was really down to the filets, the people who were kind of in the community to memorize family lines, family incidences, and pass them on word for word. And it took years. Oh, goodness me. Who's got a memory now? Who thinks they could be a fillet? Whoa. The one thing that I find is watching a textbook. I just cannot memorize from a textbook. But if I have a picture and I remember stuff, I can remember by pictures. I have no idea how these fillets work. Anyways, the speculation these Ogham stones were carved so that something would last, not just through the lives of people at that time, but would last through many millennia. Why did they want to do that? And I think this is the key to why there's Ogham stones. And really, it's only our own imagination and speculation, I think, that can tell us the story of why did they want to keep these words, especially names, that would last for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And one of the questions is, were there memorials to people? I think that's the key. If they got a name that's going to be archived, that's a memorial, a cenotaph even. Were these people esteemed? There is question, were these stones once gravestones? I don't think so, because I don't think I know of any instances where Ogham have actually got bodies around them that seem to be somehow related to the stone. Yes, they found bodies near Ogham stones, but somehow they can't relate the naming of them to the stones. I think this is something completely different. Two instances in the same location. So was it where is it a cenotaph to celebrate their passing wherever they've been passed or dead? Or is it a cenotaph or some kind of monument to celebrate the deeds of the people that are on the stones? But then why is the Maca there? Why is it sons? One of the things I tend to think of, and people who said they feel a lot of energy, some people when they go up to the old, especially these early medieval stones, the Ogham stones, they feel some sort of sense of energy they describe, similar to what they feel if they go into a stone circle or if they go to a standing stone or into a cairn. Is it because they sense the gatherings? Was the purpose of these stones for the Ogham to be points of gatherings for some reason? And if there were gatherings, I'm inclined to think that's because of something to do with the deeds of the person, and perhaps where the stones were originally put up, that's where the deed took place. But unfortunately, as I'm going to be talking about shortly, most of the Ogham stones are not actually placed where they are originally put. So that's going to confuse us even more. And another thing is are these stones there to haunt? You know, here's one in the British Museum. I forgot. You can't read it very well. It's dark. But that's regarded there as a monumental stone. But there we are. There we are, Donna. Donna absolutely loves this. Ballinavor, oh dear, I'm forgetting the name. It's down there on the Beara Peninsula, and it's not far from the Beara Stone, the kayak Beara Stone. Bally, you'll be able to say the name. Someone put it up. It's I've just totally forgotten the name. I keep seeing Bally something Vein, and I should know. I haven't been there for years, and that's enormous. And that to me is a cut stone. I'm going to talk about this. Some are cut stones. Some I think are even more ancient stones. But is that haunting? The other question is that a haunting stone? Was the big stones put there to haunt tribes desiring confrontation? Were they intimidation stones? They were put up by perhaps another clan or family or tribe saying, look, we're strong too. This is what we can do, and go away. So almost like a warning. And somehow I think these stones are a bit like flags are today. Every family, tribe, and clan, they seem to have some kind of totem. So I think I'll go on to totem pictures now. They seem to have some kind of totem to communicate their presence, to somehow communicate their significance. And these are, even from medieval times, you get these type of things. It's to me, there's more than a person's presence. It's look, our great hero, our great person of deeds is still present. And if you dare come near us, he will haunt you or she will haunt you. And of course, it is mainly he's, unfortunately. So it's communicating the presence. And in some ways, the position of these stones, they could be like the ancient form of an air code, a postcode, or a zip code. That's another thing. Maybe they're not confrontational. Maybe they're just to tell people where they are. Yeah, and the names of the people that are chieftains or of importance to that area. So if they can read a name, oh yeah, we're near the family, we're near the clan, we must be at the right place. So they're mapping stones. That's another a theory as well. Or, as I say, are these stones a demonstration of strength? And even a kind of boundary warning, approach with caution and respect. And with the later, I tend to call them pissing stones. I bring this up because I nickname these. These are some of the Ogham stones that's at Adair, in the grounds of Adair Manor. Or is it Adair Castle? I'm not sure. And they're kind of not far away from the golf course and beside a very pretty wood. Now, this is a collection of stones, and this is something as well, a bit like flags as well. I'm going to be talking a bit about this. Why a collection of stones? These stones here, they got here at Adair, have come from various parts of Cork and Kerry and Limerick, what's now Limerick. Why were they all collected up here? And I call them pissing stones because it reminds me of the reason that dogs, foxes, and other animals, they pee on trees, stones, anything upright. So I call them pissing stones as the Ogham. Was it, again, the marker of territory and a warning? This is our territory. We've pissed on them. Only our clan has pissed on them. Go away. Was that a reason for the stones? And the earliest I know really of that legend, and I've come up with some sessions and I will do this in more detail, was this tree character, half-tree character, Billy. He was the grandfather of the sons of Mill, the father of Mill, who's said to be half human and half hazel. And hazel was where the wisdom of the Mill came, because they were tree people. And this is a reason it's said that the Mills and the Milesians were tree people. And when they came over to Ireland, they were up against the Tuatha De Danann and remains of Firbolg, who were farming people. They had cleared forests and they had cleared areas. They had settled farming. But these were people that did do farming of a sort, but it said they were tree people. It was them that brought the Brehon Law. It was them that brought the tree language. And I think this is very much the important part. The Billy tree, each of the clans, starting from the Milesians, they had their Billy tree, which was their mother tree, the very important tree, usually an oak or an ash or a major apple tree. I don't think I've got any Billy trees here, but I think I'll come up with this one. There we have it's a stone I saw by a biggish tree. And to move on from that, what used to happen with these Billy trees was that the tribes would have their berry tree, but other tribes would try to invade and cut it down. They would even not only just cut it down, they would try and dig down to the roots and pull the roots up to take it away. And what an effect, what a demoralizing effect on a tribe that will be, that their mother tree has been taken away by another family, another clan, another tribe. And it's as if suddenly the connections are lost, and the tribe would feel weakened, lost, and they would submit to the ones probably that took the billy tree, totally demoralized. And that was the effect. And I think the Ogham Stones may somehow have developed from those billy trees. That's just one theory. And as I say, a lot of these stones, these are there once again, they're not in their original locations. Some of them have traveled quite far. Did they get here because there were tribes or people that went invading places of Cork and Kerry, Limerick, wherever, and they would grab their stone, their own stone, away from its position as a kind of demonstration. Oh, we're stronger than you, that you got this bold protector. Look, we can take it away. So in a way, today, it would be the same effect, I think, if a flag was taken away. And some groups, as I say, these are collections that have been. This is the Adair one is a huge collection. I don't know if they were seized or whether there was a friendly arrangement, because another huge collection is, I'm probably got a picture coming up soon, is the Corridor of Stones in Cork University, and they picked up stones from around the country, and they got this great corridor where the public can go, and it's just a whole corridor of Ogham stones, both sides. And they come in different forms. Some of them are obviously very ancient stones, some are modern cut stones. And then there's this surprising, there's Ogham on a quartz stone, a milling stone. That's in the corridor as well. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of that. But it seems where there's stone, there could be Ogham, even almost like a type of graffiti. And there are collections on the grounds, as I say, Adair Manor. I got them there. Now, beyond that, the idea of seizing something kind of went beyond there. Do I have a picture of it as well? I hope. No, I don't have the picture up of it. I should have. It's kind of escaped. Oh, there it is. One thing that's famous is that it evolved from the stones, stealing these stones. And of course, stones evolved into scribing. As I mentioned earlier, the scribing went on to parchment, went on to paper, linen paper, and you got these annals. And perhaps one of the most famous is this one here, the Cathach. And this was the book that was awarded back to Columcille. This was the one where he was brought to trial in Tara, the first copyright trial ever known. But because of his agreement to go and convert the troublesome Pictish in the west of Scotland, this is how the storytellers tell it. Anyway, convert them to Christianity, the 2,000 souls, convert them there to make up for the 2,000 souls that were lost in the Battle of the Books below Ben Bourbon near here. So he got awarded back the Cathach. But what happened was he was part of the Northern O'Neills, and this Cathach got inherited by the O'Neills, being in the north, being Donegal, they became from the O'Neills to the Doneils, and from the Doneils, as they got over to Scotland, they were the MacDonalds and then the MacDonalds, and so it goes on. But they still got into battles because they were always in disputes with the West, in disputes with the South. And so before, when they went in battle, their scribe, their bard, it said, would have this Cathach, and he would walk around, what would you call them, army, militia, whatever. And he was saying he would walk around carrying this book, and it had these studs that you can see on it. And they reckon the Cathach would protect them because it had great effect on Columcille. So again, it was something they grabbed that no one else could have as the Cathach. And the Book of Kells kind of was treated in the same way as well. All of these great books, they weren't exactly read. They were almost like the bar of gold of the monastery. And if they could be seized from the monastery by the Gaelic chieftains, that was definitely collateral that they could use for bribing. They could actually use to pay off debts. They could use it for exchange. There is a word, and I haven't come to. But anyway, something they had that they could trade with. Very, very, very wealthy. And then, funnily enough, the same thing happened with harps. The best example of that is the Brian Boru. So we moved on because the scribing stuff, it went on to the bards and the bard harpers. And then you've got this in the Trinity College, the Boru harp, which actually was made a long time after Brian Boru. And we've got a harp session, Sunday session in November, and I'll introduce with the story of this. But with this, it was made in 1220, obviously a long time after Brian Boru, but it was dedicated to him. And but it was made for a guy called Donachad O'Brien. It's the O'Brien harp. And he didn't have it very long, only a year or two. And it was sent off to Scotland, somewhere near the Trossachs, a clan there, to try and get the release of a murder O'Daly of Lissadell. And he was wanted back for a trial because when he was in Ireland, it said that he killed off a tax collector. What was a tax collector back then? Because people didn't have money in their pockets, but they just took cows and chickens and milk and stuff. And so as soon as this tax collector got killed, off he went to Scotland. And so the story gets mixed up there. Did he actually go off with the harp, or was the harp behind? It's really mixed, whatever it has. Anyway, the story is that the Boru harp was said that they would trade it, that Scotland could have it for their bards as long as they sent O'Daly back for his trial. Anyway, the harp actually went over to Scotland. It was Owen II, who was kind of like, I think, the third High King of Alba, of Lennox, which is around Loch Lomond. And descended from Alwyn was Richard the Lionheart, the Earl of Huntingdon. And of course, the Earl of Huntingdon was Robin Hood. So there's a whole wonderful chain of stories from that. Anyway, the harp got over that. And so O'Daly, this is great. He got the harp, and he got into such good relations, and he actually took it on crusades. They never got it back to Ireland, so it went on a couple of crusades. And like the Catholic, like the Ogham Stone, it was like a protection. This is our strength. This is the spirit of strength. If they got the Boru harp, the O'Brien harp, and the bard went round 3 times, they would be defended out in the crusades. Eventually, he came back, and O'Daly actually came back to Ireland, and there was agreement that he wouldn't be tried for killing off the tax collector. So he was back in Ireland, without the harp. He had to leave the harp behind in Scotland, but he was allowed back. But there's a whole long story. Henry VIII ended up getting it. Henry VIII gave the harp to one of the lords in Ireland, and so it stayed in Ireland and eventually got itself to Trinity. Anyway, I've gone way off the stone, but it's just to illustrate the strength of the stone as being, we are powerful. This stone is of our power in some way. Anyway, let's see what you're having to say with that. Let's have a wee break from that. Who we got? We got Sherry. Thanks very much for tuning in. Lovely. And there's Donna. She's kind of amused by the pissing stones. And are the stones near ley lines, Lema? I think I'd have to go into a whole session about ley lines because some people, and I did this when I was young. Excuse me a moment. I've said this on Sunday sessions. I was mad on maps. And as soon as the family were into dowsing, they were using pendulums. And I got into charting very early age, into astrology, weather charting, and maps, ordnance survey maps. And you would hold the pendulum over the maps and see where the pendulum went and then draw a line. Surprisingly, when you drew a line, there was all these sites were pretty much lined up, and it could be standing stones, holy wells, fairly modern churches, cairns, and they seem to be on the line. So this is how people drop these maps of ley lines and the crisscross. But in the sort of more mature years, and I've explained it in my Bathing in the Phase Breath book, how it comes about, is that I look at this in a very different way now. And the first thing is, what is there in nature that's in a straight line anyway? And I think this is a very key point in the Orm, because we're talking about translating this cycle, seasonal, conditional language into something linear. And linear is something that was very important to the Romans. They wanted everything kind of linear, didn't they? Even the Latin and the Greeks as well. Just how do you put everything linear? Because when you got something linear, that's when you can create order. That's when you can create doctrine. And so it's taking natural forms and compartmentalizing it in some way. And my feeling on ley lines, and I'm not going to go into the full story of how I got to this. To me, ley lines are kind of a human ambition. And there's also some ancient stories that I've covered with this, because the ones, and it's connected with going back thousands of years with the cairns. The cairns were built and they were celebrated. I'm trying to find a way of keeping this very short. But cairns were bone banks, because people, they adorned their ancestors' bones. Where there was the woodland and the forest tribe, they always believed that their ancestors were in the water and they were in the weather. But when you got the Tuatha De Danann and the farming tribes, they had a reverence for the bones. So these cairns like Carrickeel and Carramore, they would have pots full of bones, and so certain times of years there'd be a reverence. The trouble is with that is that these people ended up having to be on the move, because as the population grew and the yields also were lower, they found that their cattle would wander off, and the cattle would wander off into a straight line. And so they decided it was really said to be the women that stayed behind with the bone banks. It was the men that went off to be nomadic, following the cattle. And that would have developed straight lines as well. Now, that's the story I picked up here, but I actually picked that up first in Upper Michigan, and at the Hiawatha Festival there. And I heard it from the native people there. They said that this is what happened with the buffalo. They had their sacred spaces, but the buffalo were always on the move. And the connection between their sacred spaces, they were actually purposely built there, because that's where the buffalo moved between. And so, of course, they were very sacred. It was energy. It was how they got their food supply, because this is where the buffalo went. And over here, it's where the cattle went. So that's my take again on ley lines. Anyway, that should be another Sunday session. But where did the stones for the Orms, where the Orms were written, where did they come from? And I'm trying to get my mouse into this to get some pictures. Where on earth did they come from? Now, here's one. This is a stone that's quite near. The stones, well, going back here to the lovely Donna picture. Oh, no, it's not Donna. That's that's one where Donna hadn't quite arrived yet. Anyway, it's the same boulevard. Oh, whatever the name is, down in the Beara Peninsula. The ones that were purposely used for carving, they were thin, and that's a thin one. That is tall. So they seem to have been quarried from somewhere. I don't know where the stone for this one comes from. If you actually go there, the farmer can actually tell you where it came from, but I forgot. He's very well up on how the stone. He can tell a few stories on it. So they've been quarried for purpose. And you got the stones, you got the carving on the left of that one. But a lot of the stones with the Ormond, they seem very thick and chunky. And this is one that's near us that is very thick and clunky. And perhaps these ones were not quarried, but were established stones that were used as standing stones. They go back thousands of years. They might have been relics that were here from when the melting of the Ice Age happened. And it ripped the Ice Age itself. It was like 2 miles high. And when it melted, it ripped stones away from the earth. And that became an incredible resource for making a lot of these ancient cairns, circles, or whatever they got. But some were quarried with the tools. So maybe some of these that have been carved on were from orthosat stones from claps, cairns, and tombs. As I say, in the corridor of stones in Cork, there you got the milling stone that's got, and it's an ancient milling stone. It's about 3,000 years old, and it's got orb on the milling stone. So was that converted for purpose? Anyway, again, this sort of emphasizes strength and their strength totems. And this one's interesting nearby because it's the only one I've seen. That's actually a well. That was once a holy well, but it's kind of one of those that's got lost. You might be able to see that hole to the right of that picture, and that is that well. That's the only one I've seen that's by a well. And of course, trees, the rag trees, the clutie trees, they have a reverence to that well because they're there to call up the Fae, the She, and if they are not there, maybe the Fae and the She won't turn up. So those are quite power symbols as well. So to other people, they see something like this. It seems incredibly sacred and part of their ancestral spirit and connection. And I can understand why, because talking about the farming tribes and how they look to their bones in the earthenware pots, that's a connection they had to spirit. That's the way they tended to look at it. So when they're feeling that, I don't think it's anything to do with the Orm writing. I think it's to do with the source of the stone, or more likely the position that those old stones might be in. Anyway, I'm going to explore a lot more of that within Orm divination, which is going to be next month, I think. Anyway, to me, with the tree and water folklore passion that I have, it's the tree and water to me that is the connection to the sea, she, the Fey world, folklore. Stones to me tend to be more images of vanity. That's what tends to be in my belief system. I think they're there. My perception is trees, to put these up or to put where they came from, trees needed to be cut down, and sometimes water needed to be diverted to establish stone structures because they needed water somehow to be present, maybe for stone movement. But I think even if it was just to quench the thirst of those moving the stones, but trees were cut down, water was diverted. So I question the sacredness of that, because it's meddling. It's meddling for a purpose. And as if these stones were put up as a reverence to a hero, as a reverence to perhaps scare people away, and even as a flag, to me, that's vanity. That's the way that I tend to look at that. So are these, the question there is, are the Orm stones vanity? When a tree falls, it's quickly replaced, but when a stone is cut from the earth, it doesn't grow back again. And the thought of that, when I think of that, personally, that pains me a bit. And that's what more and more I think about that, I think more in the sustainability. Anyway, I do feel that a lot of the Orm stones, that like the one that I was showing here, that their stones had somehow been recycled. I don't think they were deliberately quarried. Not most of the Orm stones that are in Ireland, I think, are recycled stones. There's a few medieval times they were quarried for the Orm purpose. Now, I think this is one actually. Oh, what's it called? Beaster. Beaster, this stone I'm showing you now. And that one is up at, it's between Ballina and Ballycastle in Mayo. You take a side road, you go off this most huge, lovely white beach. I'm trying to think of its name now. And it's on the way to there. There's hardly anybody ever there. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's worth going to. It's just a massive beach in Mayo, and it's between Ballina and Ballycastle. I might think of the beach a bit further on, but you'll pass a pathway and a sign to get to this. And this is definitely a stone that was there. It's on the way to the Cady Fields, and it's definitely an ancient stone that was carved on. And that one, I think the lettering goes up and back, down and around again. I know there's a lot of writing on that one, Beaster. Anyway, I'm going to introduce the transition from tree language to Orm now, a little bit of that. And let's go back to see, there's a nice few of you on today. There's Lynn, who's in here, just as we're talking about, just tuning in. Of course you're tuning in. Thank you, Lynn, because I'm going into the tree language now. Great. Lynn is absolutely wonderful connection to the tree. She's been very involved with the Clonmel Apple Festival, was on last week for those you watched, and she visited the Dingle Peninsula Barry Ferreter Museum. I don't know why there's a huge, I think there's a huge concentration because people haven't taken them away out of superstition today, and I'm going to show a map a bit later on. There seems to be the highest concentration of the Ogham Stones in Cork and Kerry, and also in places where there's a very active Norman medieval presence, such as in parts of alongside the Shannon, in Roscommon is one area, and in the whole area around Kilkenny, and going down in that area, that medieval area, going down into not so much Carlow, Kilkenny. What we got south of Kilkenny? I should know, but geography a bit better. Going towards Wexford anyway, maybe over to Tipperary. But you got in the medieval areas, you got a good, still got a good Orm presence. Not so much in Donegal and Ulster. Very, very few there, and there isn't much around here either. And I pointed one nearby. Oh, now what's that? You are styling. I styling. I want that ad. Yes, this isn't Sunday sessions. This is a fashion show. I'm just babbling away. I will get a catwalk at some point. Brilliant. Yes, great. Lovely one, Sherry. Thank you. Let's get back to some pictures here. Right. Now, from storytellers I've listened to, it seems you might be familiar. There's an 18 letter language, Gaelic in Scotland. And I must admit, I knew more about that than I did before I knew about Orm. And there is a train of thought that that is older than the Orm. That was what the oral language was. And because it wasn't being written down, how do you have 18 letters? The 18 letters were trees. So it was really an understanding of the trees. And you couldn't exactly line up 18 trees in a line. You couldn't make a linear language, but there'd be reference to trees when you're trying to make an emphasis of a condition of a feeling. And that seemed to be how the language was put together. And so that's much older. And that was coming from the tree people. As I was saying, the Milesians were from northern Iberia, was said to be of tree people. And there's this mystery of how was it that their understanding of a tree language, of putting the feelings and the conditions of each tree. And of course, this is where the divination has come from, because you put these feelings together, it's in a circle, in a cycle. And so people have put these together and sort of done an alternative astrology with this. And that's what I'm going to be covering in the next Ogham session, more so the divination. So anyway, you got these trees, they were transformed. How do you put these tree sounds, these tree conditions, how do you put them into a linear language? And so it was said that perhaps, here we go. I love this picture. That's what people are familiar with, sort of do divination with these. So how? Oh, I don't know what that one is. That's a bit dark. Let's leave that alone. But anyway, here we go. Here's a little charting for you of the 18 Gaelic letters. Unfortunately, they've done them in the way we recite at school: A, B, C, D, E, F, blah, 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 which I believe they weren't done. I bet they were done in the same. Beth would have been first, and you would have got Fearon, and you got Sally. You would have done it in that the way that Orm is recited now. But anyway, there's there, and I forget which ones are missing. There's two missing, isn't there? And I'm going to be talking a bit about that one. But anyway, how was these listed with sounds? obviously it seemed that in order to memorize, not only was it condition of each tree, it's folklore that there was a different sound to each Ogham letter. And at some point, some educated people took on the task of putting these sounds into symbols. So which symbols were first, the Ogham lines symbols or the scribed Latin and Greek style that ended up in the annals? And that was that next picture, is one of the annals. And this one is Gospels. Not long ago was pulled out of the bog, as a lot of these annals were. They were pulled out of bogs. Now, when I was on Iona in the 70s, I was working on Iona. This is where I first really came across the first story of the Ogham. I learned that the stories of the Gaels meeting the Picts on Iona, and the tale included a folklore of the Picts having symbol language and the Gaels having the oral tree language, and then the two of them emerging. And you might be familiar with this. This is another divination thing. And this is the trees trying to be put into a circle in order to create the language, I feel. So you've got the two merging. And when I first heard this, the idea of this tree language merging with a symbolic language, it made sense to me. And it got involved in the Pict stones at a later date. I don't know if that's clear to you, but notice there is some Ogham on that merged in with some Pict symbols. There's a diagram. I'll give you the diagram. There you go. And that's what we've got. You got the Ogham on the left. You got these Pict symbols. That's the stone itself. And that's just a translation on the left. But that's the shape of the stone. It was a broken up stone. That's where the cracks are there. And it was scattered, and someone managed to put the whole thing together, which was quite a miracle. It's one of the best that we've got. We've got the Pict symbols, which was the language in itself, which had that serpent, and then the Ogham came. So it's very symbolic of the merging of the two, why and how. Now there is a modern theory that the Ogham is actually the Druid language. So let's bring up some Druids. There's some Druids talking to each other in Ogham, I assume. And it's a hard one for me because I haven't really grasped what a Druid is. Some of you have probably got a definition. I've been amongst the sort of Druid culture, but I haven't really got the grasp. What the heck is a Druid? A Druid, Druid. And one thing that's for sure is our word door somehow, I think, comes from that. The door. And when we're talking of door, to me, it's entering down into the roots. And when you go down the roots, down below, say take an oak tree, and it says there are many lives inside an oak tree. Supposing you got the roots and you go down deep, what you're going to go to? The tree is full of water, but the roots are going deep. Where are you entering with the roots? You're entering into the she world. And so roots as well, they were the source of the Brehon Law. It doesn't seem it, but the Brehon Law was there not only to give a sense of order and a sense of being and a sense of sharing other people, but it's also the law that protects trees. And but with the Brehon Law, it doesn't seem to connect with that whole Ogham vanity of heroes. The one thing that you don't get is it's equality, it's balance with the Brehon. So that's why I see a sort of a conflict. Anyway, the one thing there is a theory, and I can go along with this, that somehow the Druids were alchemists of sound. There's quite modern looking. I don't think Druids went around with crowns like that, but he's got a wee angular harp, and that kind of makes sense. And because there was sound, they perhaps could organize sound into octaves. And this is where 18, you couldn't do octaves with. The Druids, I think, if they were into sound, they would understand the pentatonic. You know, pentatonic is very much a primitive sound sequence, a sound cycle, the 5 notes in an octave. They could use the 5 notes. And there you got added 2 more symbols, and you've got 2 you've got train of thought on this. You've got these cycles of sounds, and this is where they could actually apply the Ogham sounds. Now, I can see this coming into play as the music of that came together with the Ogham, that it actually was a sound. And it wasn't a language, it's simply as if they had a possession of and an education of these 20 symbols for the 4 octaves, the pentatonic scale, 5 notes per octave. And then along comes this oratory language, which was perhaps sung in scales when recited. Synthesize that and the tree language, and there we have it. And it seemed in later medieval times, that's what it was. Just think of Mass. It made me wonder if people in medieval times, was it that they sang everything? They didn't have a speaking language. They sang. And is that why in Mass it sang? And there's this love of the Psalms. It's singing. And there's a legend that the Ogham was applied to pages of the Psalms. And this was the whole story behind Columkill copying the book of Psalms that he got into awful trouble with, that perhaps he had found a book because it had some kind of Ogham notation with it. I love that thing. Anyway, this is going on a lot longer than I anticipated, although I had a theory. I've got Linda, who's patiently working. She's patiently behind, and I was going to bring in an addendum to the apples. And as I'm talking about the association of trees into the Ogham, and through my mind, I'm thinking of Quirt the apple, and you heard me about apples. So I'm going to bring Linda because she had this lovely poem, and it starts off, it drifts onto something else, like what I always do, but it seems so pertinent to the time. And I said, "Oh, Linda, you got to come on board and share this." We couldn't do this last week for some reason. Maybe I didn't get hold of her. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to introduce you to Linda Rosewood, and she's going to introduce the poem and share it with you. Thank you for your patience in hanging on here, Linda. Thank you. So Linda's been a great help for years. We've helped when we've been in California, Claire and myself on tour. She's just endlessly was helping us out with tips. Wonderful, generous person, just this continual generosity, and has had challenging times herself. But she's just gone through it like a sort of a bowl of apples, I suppose. It's just always fresh, always crispy. And so I'll introduce you to Linda here. Hi.
Thanks, John. I missed the Apple session last Sunday because a friend of mine had a 60th birthday salon at the same time. And I'm in Donegal right now. She's in California, but she had friends from all over the world giving her their birthday wishes. And I wrote this poem about being 60. The poem is called 60 is an abundant and unitary perfect number. It is a craft we learn as children, to peel and carve autumn apples into human features. By Halloween, brown cheeks dry up in furrows of winsome eyes and a wry smile. Girls think the apple doll faces are cute and will never be their own. My cohort approaches 60. 60! What a great number, I said to a friend, the favorite of ancient Babylonians. Look what happened to them, she says. 60. 60, so readily sliced up into ages and stages and minutes and hours. So sexagesimal. All those unfractional portions adding up to ourselves. 60. When we were young, we regarded old women and said to each other sagely, wisdom. If we saw the red-hot revolutionary budding with wet passions of her flesh, bearing unspeakable things, kind, joyful, and cruel, we said to ourselves, cute. Now we are 60, with seasons carved into our faces. We've crafted ourselves complete, blossom and core.
Sorry, I had my mic off. Sorry, thank you very much. There was me talking away. I'm miming. I'm the mime. Thanks very much for that. I was trying to avoid the echo because I've had echo challenges. Anyway, mic's on. Yeah, I was. I was saying, that you've got a challenge now, Donegal being under lockdown, and I know the Ogham stones are quite scarce in Donegal and Ulster, even though there's a lot of carved stones from the monastic. Are you familiar with any Ogham stones when you get out and about?
There's a stone near us in the Ards Forest.
Of course, yes.
But until I saw your talk today, I thought Ogham stones were pretty kind of sterile, and it just seemed like a cenotaph or someone tagging a stone with their name and saying, "This is me." So I really appreciated the talk today, because I have a lot more affection for them now, I think, especially since you connected them with the sacred trees. I much better.
Well, I'm going to be going more into the divination. I think I've done a tree one. I will do one. But to say this is the confusion, I'm being polite, I think, with this whole talk. Yes, bottom line is I think they are sterile. And I think people are making more of them than what they are. And I think the whole adventure with this is where they're being placed is got a heart. And the trees, I think it's in a way a transition from the spirit. It was almost like a transition from that spirit to our vanity, to our linear. So I'll go with your instruction, but it's, what's behind that in some way. When you see something that's linear and is on a page, I think you're like reading a book. You're reading a linear language. People don't like reading textbooks. But if they can read a book where it sets off their imagination and they get pictures in their minds, somehow they'll end up remembering that, but they won't remember the linear stuff. And as I say, I can't remember where the stones are. I can't remember what's written on the stones, but I certainly remember the experiences I've had when I've approached the stones. So that's a lot to do with it. Anyway, I've been going on a lot longer. I'm going to cut the rest of this off. We're obviously going to have to do a part 2 on the stones, typical. There's a couple of things I'm going to close this off with. So thanks very much, and I'll contact you later, Linda. That's very kind of you. Thank you. And so that's Linda there. Thank you. That was great. Now, the next thing, there she is again. There is a way and means of, let's get me on, and then I can, that's it. Thank you very much. Now, one thing I'd like to introduce before we go, and this is a lovely novel thing, and I think you'll enjoy this, is how do you do your own Ogham translating? And I'm going to bring up a wee site, and we're going to do something. I've not done this on this sort of show in this, so this is something you're very familiar with when you do Zoom, but I haven't been doing this. This is, let's see if I can get to it now for you. This is the Ogham. This is a kind of an Ogham translator. It's at ogham.co. I'll bring up a banner later. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can get this full screen for you, and I'm going to do something with this. Right. Now, I should have shown you this first. Let's go the other way. I wonder if I can unplug this for a minute. Okay, just to show that it works. I'm going to show you this thing. This is something you're probably quite familiar with. Am I upside down with it? No, that's it. People buy these sort of things as gifts. And this is what Ogham is to a lot of people. And now this is going backwards because we've got Home Sweet Home. This is where someone's got our Latinized language, and they have tried to do some Ogham symbolism with this. And it's all going backwards because the idea was you went from the trees to the Ogham and then to a Latin. Anyway, they're novel and it's beautiful. And take notice of the sweet there. That's quite a fascinating thing. So take that in mind. And I'm going to duplicate this through this Ogham.co if I can get back to it again. There we go. Where are you? I think that's it. Right. That's the translator, and I'm going to do a wee thing with you, and I'm going to get it Is it full screen? Yes, it's full screen. Amazing. Right, hope you can see this. I'm wiggling around on this one. So I'm going to use that translator and see if you work. Now, supposing it was home sweet home. So I'm going to put in home. There's home. And there's the translator. And have I spelled home right? Yeah. Look at that. First of all, it goes from the bottom to the top is the first thing you notice. And when I look at this stone here, it's exactly as it is on the stone. Now, the sweet bit is a funny one. Suppose you put the sweet. What comes up? No J, W, or Y in the Ogham alphabet. So we got seat. We haven't got the W. So what are we going to do? Because on this stone, there is obviously 5 letters. What they've actually put in, because they couldn't got the sweet, they've actually put in an F. Or it could be a V, so it's feet. So that's how they got around with it. Anyway, that's something for you to play around with. That's ogham.co, and it gives you an Ogham transliterator that you can have fun with, and you can start putting words in, and it's a great way you can learn the Ogham, because all these letters come up, and then you can look at your tree wisdom book and see what trees are each of the letter. I just think that's a fun thing, and I hope that's a nice novel thing for you to be demonstrating. I hope that worked out okay for you. It is a fun thing to do. Let's see what you had to say about that one. Lynn, love the thoughts. What she got here? And your rendition. Thanks, Linda. And as Donna's got a big thing here. Beautiful poem, Linda. Great. Great. Oh, she's gone now. I'll pass the messages on to you. 60 was a magical year for you. Great, Donna. Thanks for, thank you, Lynn. Yes, I had the microphone switched off, as I say. I didn't want echo. I'm going to get earbuds for next week. I think something like that. But thank you for that. So listen, I've got a couple more little things to actually show you, because really got to wrap this up. Where are they? There's a map of Ireland. You can see the clusters. I think if it's close up there, it's not very good dots, but the clusters there, as I say, Cork, Kerry, and in Norman medieval times. What else have I got here in the pictures? Oh, that's the Corridor of Stones in Cork University. And then we have the, this is over in Scotland. This is where you get the greatest cluster of the Pictish, Aberdeenshire, Moray, Fife. This sort of they're elsewhere in Scotland, but this is the huge cluster up the coast in Caithness onto Orkney, the whole Pict culture and the whole symbolism. But somehow, as I did show on the stone that's near Aberdeen, again, I'm forgetting the names. I've visited so many times. It's in a sort of a council house estate, but it's beautifully put together. But the one where I showed you had the serpent and the Ogham stone, something brandy butt stone that was. But you've got that's sort of, that shows you a more recent post-medieval, where they actually started putting the Ogham symbols onto the stone rather than down the sides on the edge. And then they started bringing in the Christian symbolism. These are the post-medieval. So I'm going to do a part 2 of post-medieval at some point. And even got to the point when the Vikings came along, they joined in too. Here's a stone here that's got the Viking sort of rune cuttings along with some Ogham. So it's got quite fascinating here. As I say, unfortunately, Denise couldn't come, so I'm going to put her on for another time. I think it really is, I better get on with telling you what's coming up, because next week it's going to be much more interactive. We've got the Ermid, isn't it? It's a herbally session, and we're really going into the Ermid. A kind of I've got to find out what we're doing ourselves. I forget the actual title from next week. There we go. Right. Oh, people are asking when's, before I get onto that, people are asking, when are you going to open those labyrinth gardens? And the thing is, I don't think it's going to happen this year, unfortunately. And I don't think we'll be having the lighted labyrinth, although I might set up one walk around, but it's just so unfortunate. The limitations with the COVID. But next year, next April, we got to do something to allow you back in and be here on Sundays at least. I must admit, any volunteers, we can do the COVID separation and COVID. We can operate being COVID wise here if anybody's volunteer. But I think we've only really got 2 weeks left that we can really do much that can fit into the weather. And we're below average temperatures now, which is quite a challenge. And I'm going to be developing a self-service course, and this is going, like today, I've run out of time. I could have gone on for a lot more about the stones, but in the course, the stuff that I'm introducing in the Sunday sessions will be going a lot deeper. And the sponsors to the Labyrinth Gardens and these Sunday sessions, the course will be free to the gift to the sponsors. So it'll be free for them. And it's going to be called She, Trees and Water Folklore, because the Sunday sessions really touch on these. So we're on the fringe with these stones, and the course will go into deeper into the themes and these stories. Just for Donna, really, I do have a poem called Pissing Stones. How did that Ogham stone arrive here? Fascinating notches, there to tell us something, and a dog lifting his leg to piss on it. Is that the mystery of these stones revealed? Nothing to do with sacred enlightenment, nothing to do with enforced ownership, but a spot where a human pissed and erected a totem of his strength and claimed his presence of his tribe. Now, doubt that Ogham stones seen today are in the positions they were first erected. Maybe they're battle trophies, like seizing an opponent's flag. So coming up, as I say, is we got next Sunday. Thank you for hanging on that you do with this ultra long session. So next week is Emid, her cauldron and folklore, and we'll have some herbalist guests on for that one. That's the 4th of October. And then the following 18th October, going into inspired journalism and native poetry. There's someone worn out from there. Or someone being inspired, got into the tree labyrinth, laid down. I thought that was very symbolic of being inspired and then leaping up and gently moving into some native poetry. Then on the 18th, I'm separating the water and fire dragons. This is going to be the fire dragons, serpents, and snakes as we're getting towards the Sawan. So we're going to have a great session of that one, probably have fires going. And then on the 25th, one I haven't done before and been looking forward to doing it, is the folklore of crows, ravens, and other corvids. And I said corvids, not other corvids, definitely. And it's 22nd, I should have a picture to follow up from here. It's the 22nd of November is the next Ogham session, which will be the Ogham divination. So really, is there any, just give you another checking on what you had to say there. I hope you've enjoyed this. And Lynn, fascinating. Thank you very much. Resourceful, thank you very much. Margie, thanks very much. Margie, terrific painter. Try and get, if there's an exhibition or a festival somewhere, try and get to see Margie's art. It's absolutely wonderful. And I bet she could do a wonderful interpretation of the own trees. Thank you again to Linda Rosewood for being live with us today. We'll get Denise on as a kind of intermission at some point. And I'd like, please keep commenting here, even if you're watching this after it's been live, because like the Ogham Stones, we're an archive as well. I'm not wiping them off or sending them anywhere. What I really is time to tell you and time to wish you and time to line up. Right. Enjoy a safe week. Keep it full of wonder, full of inspiration and celebration and enchantments until we meet again next week for Ermed's Cauldron. So until next Sunday, do play well, and thank you so much for watching and keeping up and having interest. So bye.